you, you can share it right now on your page if you want. So, good evening, good afternoon, and Eid Mubarak Saeed for my colleagues from the Arab or the Muslim world. I am so happy today to introduce my friend and colleague, Professor Terence Kleven from Central College, to talk or to take part of this series of lectures. But let me introduce him in a few words. Terence Kleven has taught at Central College since 1996. He has published many articles and book reviews on many fields like Old Testament studies, Greek and Arabic political philosophy, Middle Eastern politics, and Islamic studies. He has received grants for research from many foundations. No room to mention all of them. Kleven is the recipient of 2 Fulbright scholarships. The first allowed him to study in Beirut, Lebanon, and the second in Amman, Jordan. Personally, I had the privilege to know him for the first time in London in 2010. I enjoyed reading some of his articles and book reviews, mainly on al-Fārābī. Terry is familiar with this series of lectures. He participated in the discussion with us many times, so he knows very well how it works. Today, I am pleased to have him as a speaker. The lecture he's going to give touches a problematic topic, that of the view of al-Fārābī towards the 5 logical arts and its relation or their relations to the university curriculum. Before giving the floor to Terry Kleven, I might say some words in Arabic. سعيد جدا بتقديم الأستاذ تيرنس كليفن من سنترال كوليدج بالولايات المتحدة الأمريكية. تيرنس كليفن متخصص في الدراسات الفلسفية المتعلقة بالسياقات الإسلامية، لكن أيضا بالسياقات العبرانية واليونانية. تيرنس كليفن نشر العديد من المقالات والدراسات ومراجعات الكتب. سعدت بقراءة بعضها وخاصة تلك المتعلقة بالفارابي. تيرنس كليفن أحد المسهمين منذ زمن في هذه الحلقات التي تنظمها مؤسسة البحث في الفلسفة والعلوم في السياقات الإسلامية. هذه هي المحاضرة 17 التي تنظمها هذه المؤسسة، وأنا سعيد بتقديم Terence Kleven. So there, Professor Terence Kleven, I'm so happy to give you the floor to present your lecture. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation. Thank you for our colleagues to join us and for the discussion. It follows.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes,
Fouad?
please. Go ahead, please.
And thank you for the invitation to participate in this lecture series. and for the opportunity to exchange conversations and views over a number of years now. And I look forward to your comments, Fouad, as well as others in this presentation. So I would appreciate any criticisms or evaluations any of you would have, so I look forward to discussion in the end. So my topic is al-Fārābī's Introduction to the Five Rational Arts, and it's a revaluation of our university curriculum in light of al-Fārābī's work. The curriculum of our educational institutions reflect our accounts of the organization and respective ranks of the disciplines of the sciences. These curricula are surprisingly similar, whether we attend the Max Planck Institute in Berlin, the Sorbonne in Paris, Oxford University, Harvard University, Quairain University in Rabat, or my own home institution, Central College in Pella. We may even speak more accurately of a curriculum in the singular, which is shared by institutions around the world. This uniformity is caused by our common intellectual heritage. This curriculum represents the divisions of the arts and sciences formulated primarily in the 19th century in Europe and North America. It is a synthesis of German idealism, British positivism, of American pragmatism, and of German and French existentialism and now postmodernism, even if these different threads are not compatible with each other and are not even internally consistent with themselves. We will need to read representative writers from these traditions to see what has shaped us. Notice I have specified that this curriculum came primarily from Europe and North America. University curricula were not always generated in these two continental areas. Excuse me. The ancient Greeks, and then for 800 years of Arabic and Islamic civilization. They preceded the developments of the past 500 years. I intend today to explain why this Greek and Arabic tradition still matters to us. Pragmatism and the centers of language and literary study. Modern life is fairly pragmatic and utilitarian, and the sciences which appear to be the most practical are the ones which are the most easily emphasized and supported. In this context, however, the disciplines which study the specifically human things, what we usually call the humanities or the arts, may not appear as the most important or the most needed. Maybe only are seen as adornments. Departments of language study in particular, whether English or Arabic or otherwise, and the humanities in general, which should serve as focal points or centers of our intellectual life, can become marginalized as one department or a few departments amongst many, even amongst an ever-expanding number of novel disciplines competing for scarce university resources. I'm going to make the case for the recognition that the humanities departments can and must serve as centers of the entire educational curriculum. Centers which emerge from literary and philosophical traditions and which consist in the best thinking of people over time. I do think that we in the humanities have not always made a good case that we should be the core of the curriculum. And the fault of our marginalization is too often our own. These centers of the university curriculum, however, ought to give us perspective, a way of seeing and judging the whole of life. Culture, as T.S. Eliot has said, is primarily about language, and the best uses of language in literature, in history, in philosophy, in science, and in religion will be necessary for a refined and vital culture. Eliot also says that this civilized culture is the reason that all our endeavors and our studies matter. How and why is this so? Well, one of the central philosophers in the Arabic-speaking tradition, Abu Nasr al-Fārābī, makes the case that all argumentation even in the natural sciences, is rooted in our natural languages. And the precision and breadth in the use of language will make science possible and cause it to flourish. The intellectual and spiritual center of our nation emerges significantly from the measure to which we pay attention precisely to coherence in language. Those of us in an English context will need to attend to precision in English language and literature. Those in an Arabic context will need to attend to precision in Arabic language and literature, and so on. The most renowned thinkers and writers of the Arabic tradition are al-Kindi, al-Fārābī, Ibn Sina, Ibn Bajjah, Ibn Tufail, Ibn Rushd, Ibn Tumus, and Ibn Khaldun, amongst others. The literary tradition in Arabic is more recognizably philosophic than the English tradition, even though not for this reason any less literary. The greatest achievements in the past 70 years or so in the evaluation of Arabic and Islamic studies have been accomplished by those who have explained most precisely the literary qualities of these Arabic philosophers, and have shown that these literary qualities are the necessary means to understand their philosophical and scientific strengths. Excuse me. I refer, for example, to the scholarship of Muhsin Mahdi in such essays as Philosophic Literature, which is a chapter in a collection, Religion, Learning, and Science in the Abbasid Period, published in 1990. The aim of my lecture is to make the case that al-Fārābī's collected works are a monumental achievement in Arabic and Islamic civilization. These writings provide an account of what we ought rightly to call philosophic science. As a science, al-Fārābī seeks knowledge in all its divisions. As a philosophic science, it goes to roots and is comprehensive, is even architectonic. In doing so, it provides a unity of all of the sciences. Secondary or more universal causes yield more knowledge than their immediate causes. And therefore, philosophic science is engaged in ranking the merits and identifying the purposes of all of the science in respect to their attainment of human knowledge and good. It was this tradition of philosophic science, which was the cultural and civilizing aspect of Arabic and Islamic tradition in the classical period of Arabic and Islam. As comprehensive too, this philosophic science rightly judges the necessary and proper ends of both religion and politics as they contribute respectively to human happiness, both in this world and in the life of the world to come. For at least 800 years after al-Fārābī's death, the Arabic Islamic literary tradition continued to name al-Fārābī as the second teacher, al-Muallim al-Thani, the second teacher after Aristotle, because he was the founder on which some of the finest later writings of the tradition, such as Ibn Sina and Ibn Rushd, would so fundamentally depend. Even as Shakespeare is essential to English culture, a single writer, namely al-Fārābī, was and is essential to Arabic and Islamic culture. The crisis of our time and why classical Arabic literature is an answer. Let me go a step further. A number of the best thinkers in European and North American philosophic science now recognize that there is a certain crisis in our current situation. For a long time, a fact-value distinction in the social sciences has made the notion of scientific knowledge of the good a contradiction in terms. Science, it is often said, cannot and should not judge political and moral good. Science is instrumental, and its purest and best state can serve the tyrant as much as the virtuous ruler. Added to this, the methodology of historicism undermined all traditions of wisdom because it claimed that all knowledge and all cultures are historically relative, except, of course, historicism's unhistorical, universal premise that all knowledge is historical. More recently, postmodernism questions and then denies the merit of law and custom, of every notion of right, and all notions that nature is a standard of good. And in doing so, even undermines the possibility of science. In short, modern science has accepted various ways of weakening rationalism instead of finding ways of defending itself. Al-Fārābī, in the classical philosophic tradition on which he draws, is a monumental alternative and an answer to this crisis. So even as medieval Arabic and Islamic civilization once kept alive a rational tradition in the Middle Ages, so it may once again remind us of what civilization and culture looks like. Part 2, Al-Fārābī's 5 Rational Arts. Al-Fārābī's 5 rational arts are rhetoric, poetry, sophistry, dialectic, and demonstration. These are called arts, sana'ah, and they are composed of rules to guide the actions of each of these arts and their specific ends. That is what they accomplish. Their end is science, ilm. But science cannot be achieved, according to Al-Fārābī, without art. He also calls these arts logical. Al-Sina'iyu, al-Mantakiyatu, because they are the basis for argumentation in every science. He will also use the phrase syllogistic arts, al-Sana'iyu, al-Qiyasiyatu, because he is interested not only in the judgment formulated in one statement, but in the relation of one statement to the next. One sentence following another with a sufficient common term will often lead to another judgment, an act of reasoning, or a syllogism, it is called. The rational arts study this process of the joining of words and sentences and statements, because Al-Fārābī says this joining in language is the joining of things in the soul. All writing, whether treatises, poems, novels, scientific journal articles, and so on, are to be judged by these joinings, these coherences. To understand language, we will need to recover the Arabic sense of nukt as rational or articulate, which is a translation of the Greek word logos. In contrast to the way in which current views of science separate the arts disciplines of the curriculum from the science disciplines, Al-Fārābī's account shows the dependency of all language upon articulate speech, and the means to discover and imitate articulate speech is through these rational arts. Thus, to state this as forcefully as possible, the center, the core of the entire university curriculum is found in these 5 rational arts, and they are equally important to the study of physics as they are in the study of literature. Science will not be accurate or vigorous unless it emerges from a knowledge of these arts. These rational arts are the guarantee that we can think and judge well about every field of knowledge. These rational arts form the basis for a unity of sound judgment throughout the curriculum and in the community. Section B, the assent of the mind to truth, tasdiq, the conception of truth, tasawwur, and the remembrance of the two. The rationalizing purpose of these arts entails a distinction, according to al-Fārābī, between assent and conception, in order to identify whether an individual has an assent to knowledge, even if not a complete understanding, or whether he or she has an assent as well as a proper understanding of a thing. Assent is the measure or degree of the adhesion of the mind to truth. And as a measure, we can speak of either more or less assent to a truth or ranks of assent. The aim of each art will be to create the highest degree of assent possible, even a complete assent, although each of the 5 arts will do this in separate ways. Conception is the understanding of the knowledge of a thing. It is the recognition of the essential attribute of the thing. It is only the degree of knowledge of a thing, because complete knowledge is an aim rather than a once-for-all possession. Yet, knowing the essential attribute is possible. Finally, assent and conception need to be, al-Fārābī says, remembered. They need to be recollected together in the formation of the unity of the intellectual act of knowing. Here again, we have the joining in the soul, the joining of assent and conception through recollection. If the conception is not remembered, or if assent is weak or non-existent, there will be no formation of the intellect with knowledge. Each of these 5 arts has rules by which it creates assent and conception. Rhetoric seeks to create assent, but does not achieve a complete conception. Poetry is similar to rhetoric, and interestingly, in Arabic, tasawwur, conception, is a type of image making, and preserves in Arabic the sense of Aristotle's comment in the De Anima that the soul does not think without an image. Sophistry seeks complete assent with no intention of discovering truth, even deliberately covering up the truth. This strange art, whose only purpose seems to be protect the good in time of war. More about this later. Dialectic and demonstration focus on reaching both complete assent and complete conception. All of these arts are necessary, and knowledge, that is science, is not achievable without a mastery of each one of them and all of them together. Let me provide only a brief summary of them. The rules of the art of rhetoric emerged from the need for speech to persuade groups of people. The purpose of this persuasion is to create assent to a certain opinion or truth amongst the masses. This art is, amongst all of the arts, the primary political art. This art will require the speech to be pleasing to the community. Such speech cannot usually be harangue or even exhortation, telling the community it is wrong, but rather it will need to be an inspiration to a higher good or noble purpose. The challenge that this rhetorical art has is that it must recognize the powerful opinions of the good, which are already shared by the community. In any particular community, the rhetorician will need to adjust to powerfully held opinions. Perhaps, for example, it is the case that the community is dominated by the opinion that all that really matters in life is health, in which case the rhetorician will need to adjust to this opinion while at the same time awakening the idea that health is not the only good in life. After all, an animal can be healthy, have much to eat, and may live in pleasant surroundings, but not perform any specifically human ends, such as good judgment or love. A cultured human community should, in contrast, value intellectual culture, and will be pleased with honoring and evaluating and improving upon great works of arts and sciences, and in the teaching of virtuous religion. And it is this type of community which the art of rhetoric seeks to create. In recognizing that rhetoric must please the community, however, the rhetorician will need to moderate his or her aspiration to high ideals or to a deeper and more remote set of causes, even if not losing track of them completely. The aim of the rhetorician is to move the community, however modestly, in the direction of a more rational understanding, if not a completely rational one. The art of rhetoric persuades the community to assent to an opinion even before the complete knowledge of that opinion is understood. Since at any point in time, not everyone in the community will be able to have complete understanding. Yet if the community is to cooperate to bring about specific human ends, its citizens will need to assent to a common good. Who are then the rhetoricians, and what are the rules of the art? Al-Fārābī says that these rhetoricians will be the statesmen, the imams and religious leaders, the heads of communities and households. The study of the rules of grammar will be a necessary, but not a sufficient condition for this rationalizing art. Although grammar can explain why some conditions of a statement make sense and others do not, grammatical conditions of coherence are not enough to understand the art of rhetoric. The rules of grammar in a particular language may be fulfilled in a particular statement, even though the statement still does not make sense. Moreover, grammar, while correcting the lack of sense in one statement, does not connect one statement to another. These larger movements or coherences of language will require the study of rhetoric, which relies upon but moves beyond grammar. The rhetorical art will need to include the usages of words, whether they are univocal, equivocal, or derivative, definition of style and literary form, genre, and of types of connections of one statement or premise with another. That is syllogistic argumentation in language, amongst other things. The study of the most comprehensive literary and philosophical texts of any tradition, even the scriptural texts of that tradition, such as the Quran in Islam, the Torah in Judaism, and the Gospels in Christianity, will need the art of rhetoric, because the supreme examples of rhetoric for the persuasion of the community are found in the prophets. Section 2, or actually it's the second art, the art of poetry. Poetry shares with the art of rhetoric the aim to persuade the listener to assent to an opinion. It aims at complete assent, and at least partial, and sometimes complete conception. The purpose of the art is to have a rationalizing effect, even if only partial, on the community. The art of poetry includes music and song, and all the conditions of music and song, such as tone, rhythm, melody, and harmony. These conditions of music are present in the art of rhetoric and need to be studied in rhetoric as well. But these conditions are especially present in poetry. defining nature of poetry is the use of imitation. That is the drawing of a likeness between two entities, which are not of the same nature, but whose comparison draws a remarkable similarity precisely in the midst of the difference. T.S. Eliot calls this specific type of imitation a metaphor, and he says it is a violent yoking together of differences. And through this surprising similarity in difference, we can see a condition of one of the things, one of the yoked things, or even the nature of the thing in a more accurate way. This art, like rhetoric, is political in nature because it is linked with the community. The well-recognized poets of antiquity, Homer, Dante, Shakespeare, address and persuade a community to a noble and specifically human end. The key is that the poet must aim at obtaining a human end, the highest of which is knowledge, perhaps even science, and all that it leads to, including love and happiness. But of course, the poet may serve the aims of private individuals in being moved by greed or by lust or emotional self-absorption. Poets in their worst moments exploit the human affections of others for their own financial interests, whilst not really being concerned how the individuals they exploit are affected by their poetry and song. By the way, as you probably all know, one of al-Fārābī's longest treatises is on music, the great treatise on music, Kitab al-Musica al-Kabir. And he treats music as a rational art. Thus, for al-Fārābī, the art of music remains a rational art because its aim is knowledge and the refinement of affections consistent with wisdom. According to al-Fārābī, the art of poetry draws upon the deepest passions of the irrational soul to give them order and refinement without diminishing their intensity and pleasurable nature. The art of poetry is the political art in which the topic of friendship is often present. It is the art which inspires friends to assent to great political ends together, to marry, to have a family, to join others in a community event, in a music ensemble, in a choir, in a Quran or a Bible study, in a work of charity, in participation or celebration of a sports team, and so on. The poet, and to be sure, even the scientist, discovers images, creates imitations to assist in his or her exposition of knowledge. The third art, the art of sophistry. Once we have introduced the arts of rhetoric and poetry, it is easier to summarize al-Fārābī's account of the art of sophistry. To be sure, I expect this art is one of the most unfamiliar to us. In its worst instance, when the rationalizing and political arts of rhetoric and poetry fail, what they lead to, what remains, is simply sophistry. The speech appears to present truth, but does not. As an art, however, sophistry is not simply defined as a privation or when another art fails. What distinguishes the art of sophistry from the arts of rhetoric or poetry is the end for which each are used. The first aim of this art of sophistry is to identify false premises and false arguments in order to distinguish them from premises and conclusions of other arts. This distinction has a positive end inasmuch as this art requires us to look directly at untrue statements and to see them for what they are. But is this all the art of sophistry does? Is there ever any rational, any specifically noble end to sophistry? Is it truly an art? Surprisingly, yes, indeed there is. Amongst other considerations, in brief, it is the art necessary in a condition of war, and thus it too is a political art. When the community or the leaders of the community are dominated by false opinions, it will be impossible to live in safety without paying lip service to what is false. More specifically, in a condition of war, telling the truth to the enemy is a morally corrupt act. A failure to practice such an art would result in jeopardizing the lives of those, including oneself, who are serving the rational and human good of the community, a good which obviously will be at extreme odds with the tyrant and his or her enforcers, who have non-rational and inhumane ends in mind. There are extreme dangers to the practice of this art, not least of which is the corruption of the soul of the one practicing it in circumstances in which there is no war. Yet, in war, learning how to know what opinions tyrants will accept and reject, and how and when to speak ironically, are extraordinarily demanding, if essential, aspects of this art. And it is an art because its aim remains in the humanizing or rationalizing of the community. Concomitantly, the art will aim at the solicitation of assent from one's enemies, to beguile them to preserve a good, even when they think they are eradicating an evil. Al-Fārābī indicates the significance of this art at the beginning of his treatise on the summary of Plato's laws. Al-Fārābī begins his summary with an example. Al-Fārābī explains how an unjust ruler seeks to arrest a pious ascetic who is renowned for living a frugal and serious life, complete with wearing poor clothing and abstaining from drinking intoxicants, and is a critic of the ruler. The unjust ruler considers the abstemious ascetic a threat. The ascetic judges that he must flee the unjust ruler's city, but is aware that without dissimulation he will be caught. He changes his clothing to look like a vagabond. He acts drunkenly as he approaches the gate in order to exit the city, and he plays his lute and sings. The guard, suspecting him as possibly being an ascetic, challenges him to stop. The ascetic does so, but replies he is the abstemious ascetic whom the ruler is seeking. The guard, not wanting to be mocked by this supposed drunk, allows the ascetic to pass. Thus, in Al-Fārābī's example, the pious ascetic does not lie in speech, even if he deceives with his actions. Yet in this political situation, the art, or an art of indirection, or dissimulation, or irony is required. The ascetic saves his life to resist the unjust king another day. The ascetic's dissimulation presupposes the existence of rational truth, and the art is distinguished from sheer base corruption by its aim to rationalize the community. Only, however, amidst manifold caution. The poor, wise, and righteous man will survive to save the city another day. Such is the nature of the art, it's not art there, it's the art of sophistry, practiced at a time of war, or at least hostility. In any case, al-Fārābī spends the least amount of time on the elucidation of this art. The fourth art, the art of dialectic. Unlike the previous three arts, which address speech to the community, or at least to a large group of people, the art of dialectic is needed amongst a small group of individuals in conversation, or perhaps only two individuals, or perhaps even only between the individual and himself in his own mind. Dialectic aims to make an inquiry into a certain topic with the awareness that there is, or may be, more than one opinion regarding its solution, and the options will need to be ranked according to rational merit. Dialectic is the art which examines the starting premises of every argument, and thus of every science, and it selects, after analysis, premises which are the most secure and distinguishes them from false premises. In any given inquiry, the art allows for faulty starting points to be replaced by more secure ones. Dialectic is the going back and forth between two positions, not with the end of producing skepticism, but for arriving at real knowledge, both assent to the existence of a thing and recognition of the conception of the nature of an entity. Dialectic will be aware of false arguments of sophistry and the necessary, even if partial, arguments of rhetoric and poetry. Dialectic will be aware of and preserve the exacting standards of certainty in the remaining art, the art of demonstration, in order to show that arguments which pose as demonstrative are often, in fact, rhetorical, poetical, or even sophistical, since either their starting premises or sequence of arguments are inadequate. Dialectic starts with generally accepted opinions, which are renowned for their authority because they are associated with a group or even an individual who is respected for knowledge. But the art of dialectic needs to examine these opinions to see how well they are founded, and whether premises or arguments can be improved or replaced. The art always invites criticism because it seeks to present a genuine conversation with a questioner or between a questioner and a respondent. Dialectic is the art which is most immediately productive of all knowledge and of assent to this knowledge, even if it does not expect the conception or assent of the whole community. Al-Fārābī closely identifies this art with philosophic science. And this art of dialectic is probably one of the most important for the ways we think about the university curriculum and of preventing university curricula from becoming propagandistic. They always need to be a moving back and forth between positions to evaluate. Finally, the art of demonstration. But what then, if dialectic is so useful to philosophy itself, is the fifth art, the art of demonstration? It is nothing less than the goal and standard of all of the first four arts. Its rules are that its starting points and each of its arguments must be true and certain. The best example, to be sure, is mathematics. A triangle, for example, is defined as a three-sided plane figure in which the sum of the angles is 180 degrees. Since the starting premise is correct, all arguments based on it, and any physical science, such as architecture, which uses the notion of a triangle, depends upon this knowledge, this definition. Mathematics, however, is a specific discipline whose principles do not pertain to all nature. Even if universal in what it examines, mathematics is not the architectonic science, not really the mother of all sciences. The question is why? Because numbers and sizes of shapes, the material of mathematics, are quantities, and they are not the whole of nature. The category of quality, we go back to Aristotle's texts, is not reducible to the category of quantity. Proofs in mathematics, then, which are demonstrations of quantities, are not equivalent to demonstrations of the differences between accidental and essential qualities of a natural entity. At least since Descartes, because of the impressive certainty of mathematical demonstration in certain topics, much science has aimed at making all nature mathematical. Though, as we've just noted, there are problems when we fail to recognize category distinctions. The art of demonstration does serve as an ideal for certainty to be sought, but it is not found as often as we might expect. Remember, its primary premises must fulfill the conditions of truth and certainty. Yet this ideal of obtaining certain demonstration is always a somewhat elusive and even dangerous goal, because it encourages us to seize prematurely upon certainty. The questioning of idealism does not mean that knowledge in any art or science other than mathematics is hopeless, or that skepticism is the final philosophic truth. It does lead back to the recognition that the art of dialectic is the more usual state of all science most of the time. Dialectic recognizes, defends, and preserves the sense of the standard of demonstration, while reminding us that premature positing of demonstration is a form of dogmatism, is irrationality, and as such is unscientific. Dialectic engages in ranking the degrees of knowledge in relation to what would be complete demonstration, which, as we may note, requires some glimpse of what the nature of demonstration would be like, even while not possessing the final knowledge in any particular inquiry. A true science would equally avoid the dogmatism of a premature claim for certainty, and at the same time avoid the dogmatism of skepticism, which is the absolute denial of all certainty. So there is a summary of the five arts. Let me make some conclusions. The aim of al-Fārābī's 5 arts is the proper definition of natural entities. Definitions seek to discover the essential attributes of an entity in nature and to distinguish this attribute from accidental attributes. German idealism, along with British and American empiricism, claim we do not know the precise natures of things. We can only know how they appear. We can only know the phenomena. And in doing so, the advocates of these notions of science were distinguishing themselves from classical Greek and Arabic philosophic science. But in the assertion of the importance of appearances, modern philosophy lowered the expectations of what reason could know. Nature in these accounts is elusive, even unknowable, finally. and we can only have phenomena as manifest in particular times and places. Sort of the basis for the historicist positions that came out of Europe in the 19th century. In a decisive way, al-Fārābī made a higher claim of what was possible through the gift of reason. Al-Fārābī's philosophical science, with its insistence that the whole of the five arts were necessary for science, with its insistence that knowledge is rooted in rational art rather than simply specialized technique or method, held open the possibility of how natures of things can be known. Given a project so potentially salutary, so useful, it behooves us to learn again the philosophic science of this medieval philosopher. At very least, to check whether whether anything yet can be learned from his and his predecessors' account of nature. It seems an absolutely minimal requirement that we must recognize that coherent argumentation in language remains the center and core of the university curriculum. And we in the humanities and the departments of English and Arabic studies, as examples, need to be guardians of this coherence. We will need to make the claim in discussion about the university curriculum that the five rational arts are essential, not optional, for knowledge, because coherent argumentation in language is the center of a fully vital, comprehensive, and philosophic science. And finally, the virtuous city and virtuous religion. Al-Fārābī's account of philosophic science is not only useful for the flourishing of natural science, but it also addresses the relation, on one hand, between the political community and science, and on the other hand, between religion and science. For al-Fārābī, the five rational arts produce the faculty of good judgment, which completes our nature as human beings. This faculty of good judgment is as necessary in political matters as it is in science. And he calls the city based on this good judgment the virtuous city. Moreover, since religion is a vital part of community, this faculty of good judgment also guides us to what al-Fārābī calls virtuous religion. Perhaps it is al-Fārābī, tempted to call him the poor wise man, who was so thorough in his exposition of what matters to the whole of our lives, who will yet save the city. And thank you for your attention. Be glad for your comments and criticisms.
Thank you so much for this clear and wonderful presentation. Time to have some discussion. I will add our friends to join us in the stream, but StreamYard allows us just to be 6 persons or individuals. I will add all of you, but not at once. I need you need then according to your if you want to ask or not. So let's start with the ladies. And then I am so happy that Charles Butterworth succeeded to join us finally. Pooch also, I will add Pooch. And then I will add, the rest of our friends and colleagues. Thank you so much. Where are you, Charles? Are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, but I can't see you.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to let you. I think I see.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah. You can put on your camera.
Okay, start.
No.
My attention is in the right place, but
Yeah, this is technology, Charles. Anyway.
While I figure this out, somebody has a question.
Yeah. Okay, take your time. Take your time. I will remove you from the stream. Then I can and to let the another. Okay. Good. So again, thank you, Terry, for your wonderful presentation. I enjoyed listening to you. So questions, please. It's open. Miriam's, Joseph, Greg, thank you for joining us.
Just a moment.
Joseph, please.
Yes, so as you explained it, as you presented al-Fārābī, he was very engaged in the political reform. So this is something that I always is discussed. Dealing with philosophers, are they committed to political reform or not? In the case of Badja with the Tabdir al-Mutawahid is another position. With Averroes is something very intriguing, but I like presentation focusing on this engagement by al-Fārābī to to change society on the basis of philosophy. That's the comment.
Where is Terry?
Terry is gone.
Well, we see everybody, but we don't see Terry.
Yeah, I don't know what happened, but maybe he will join us again. Maybe he lost his connection or something. We need you, Terry.
No, but maybe you, Charles, can say something about this political side.
I had some questions for Terry, and maybe the questions should be asked simply so that we have them in mind. Terry wants us to focus on 5 logical arts. And I'm concerned with 3 arts in particular, sophistry, dialectic, and philosophy. These seem to stand apart in any discussion from the other arts. And at one point, al-Fārābī even says that they stand apart because not one of these arts looks at the specifics, or if you prefer, at the species of things. They look only at generalities. philosophers are always accused of being too vague, but I don't think that this is meant, and this criticism is meant in that way. So I wonder how one could reply to that critique by al-Fārābī. And that's one question. And a second question, I didn't understand what Terry was saying as part of his conclusion about German idealism and the kinds of German philosophy that he linked with it. In what way do German idealism and phenomenology refuse to look at the core of things, or refuse to look at the essence of things? I think you could make the accusation stick for phenomenology, but I'm not sure that it would stick for idealism. So I just have that question. And linked to it is how Descartes fits into this picture. Do we simply have to accept that Descartes' final word is doubt? Or has Descartes discovered something by reading, as he puts it, the book of nature? And if he has discovered something, what has he discovered? The reason to focus on those are because what we seem to be aware of today is the huge gap in Arabic/Islamic philosophy between the death of Ibn Khaldun and the advent of Jamal al-Din al-Afghani. In other words, between the time when there is the Great Renaissance in Europe.
Excuse me, Charles. Terry, can you close the other devices? There is some.
Yep, I did. Can you hear me now?
Great to have you again. Thank you. I mean, please, Charles and Joseph, can you please, I mean, especially Joseph, because I guess Terry, I mean, listen to the questions of Charles, but not of yours. Joseph, can you repeat your question? Sorry, Charles, for this interruption.
No problem.
Thank you. Joseph, please.
No, more than a question, it was a comment. I mean, that why do you believe that politics was so important for al-Fārābī, so that you could focus your presentation on the political side, on the political effect, these five these propedeutical sciences, no?
Yes, thanks very much. So rhetoric and poetry are always addressed to larger communities or to many individuals, and they have to accommodate appropriately. Other arts are not quite as oriented in that way. Even dialectic, for example, which can be used as a political art, may be the reflection within the mind of the individual on more than one position. So that in itself, that activity exists kind of non-politically in that context. So it depends which art we're talking about. They have different orientations toward the political, and some of them are in a way less political than others. I think dialectic and demonstration have an orientation toward the political, but they're not as deliberately speaking to a larger number of people. Does that help?
Yes. Thank you. Charles, please.
And I think I can pick up on Charles' comments.
Yes.
And I don't have perfect answers to them. I wish I knew German idealism better. But of course, German idealism goes into phenomenology. And Kant is using Hume at crucial points. He's using an empiricist at certain points to stress the importance of the way things appear in a way that al-Fārābī is more apt to say the appearances of things are somewhat deceiving, and until we get to a knowledge of the essence, the appearances are not going to give us enough knowledge of the thing. Kant's noumenon is something we cannot know. And since al-Fārābī doesn't have that same distinction between phenomena and noumenon, he is not casting the noumenon as something as absolutely mysterious. I think there's a...
How would you put those into Arabic? How would you put phenomena and noumenon into Arabic?
In case you have many devices, Charles, just put off them, please. We cannot hear you. Okay, go ahead, please.
Well, you'd have to use words of sensation or phenomena, and ma'ani is the closest thing that comes to my mind for what is not exactly sensation, but is the nature of the thing, ma'ana. Or jawhar, or that.
Yeah. How about ma'kul versus mahsus? Or ma'kulat versus mahsusat?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't see in al-Fārābī any limit to how much we can know about the natures of things. That doesn't mean at any point in time we know the natures, but there is not this limit. I think deeply embedded in German philosophy is a Lutheran distinction between the great mystery of God and the phenomena of the world, which is finally not, you cannot move from one to the other. And I don't think it is surprising that idealism or phenomenology came out of a Lutheran, that kind of Lutheran tradition. There, I'm treading on all kinds of toes.
No, that's. And then while you were not seen, I was asking about the link here with Descartes.
So let me make only one distinction there, because I don't know how to answer your question exactly, but Descartes starts with doubt, and philosophy is defined as doubt. Dialectic is not exactly the same thing. Dialectic as practiced by the Arabic tradition. Dialectic is not starting with the individual and the individual skepticism about everything but itself. It's starting with an attempt to inquire into natures which are other than itself. And it may look back and forth. It may look at different opinions about what the natures of things are, what those essential attributes are, but it's not at such a radical point of doubt. And therefore, dialectic is an inquiry, is more accurately presented as an inquiry, rather than a skepticism of all things. Now, I don't know if Descartes moves away from that position, but certainly every day. I mean, I think today in an undergraduate, or yesterday in an undergraduate class, I heard a student make a comment. She's a first-year student. Marion will check me up on this, but she says it begins with questioning everything. Where did she learn that? Well, she learned it from a 17th century philosopher who said, philosophy begins with doubt. It doesn't begin with al-Fārābī's inquiry. It begins with this kind of skepticism, which sets itself against the political and sets itself against the religious community. So those are very different starting points. And one of the reasons, I think, that what al-Fārābī and that Arabic tradition are talking about is so interesting and useful for us, because it doesn't immediately set itself against everything in the name of the individual questioning everything.
Okay. Joseph, do you have any additional question? Joseph?
It's okay. Fine.
Okay, thank you. I will remove you for a while, just for a while. Thank you. Sorry for this.
Charles, go ahead and reply.
Okay.
I want to hear what you think.
Greg, do you have any question, or shall we start with Miriam and Miriam?
No, please.
Miriam, go ahead.
Thanks, Fouad. No, thank you.
Okay.
I enjoyed your talk, Terry.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. You have to go?
Okay, then...
Actually, I have a question, please.
Yeah, please, Miriam, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this wonderful topic to highlight about. Actually, my question is regarding rhetoric itself. As explained by Islamic philosophers, it depends on the unexamined opinions. And you have speak about using these 5 rational arts in curriculum. So how we can make sure that these opinions that the rhetorician is using certain or somehow it has some kind of certain truth, because in curriculum somehow we need some certainty. So in rhetoric it depends on unexamined opinion. So I think here I'm not sure how we can make sure that the knowledge is certain.
So yes, thank you very much. So rhetoric and dialectic will both start with generally accepted opinions. Those generally accepted opinions are not necessarily wrong. They may even be, in the end, capable of demonstration. They are generally accepted opinions just because we don't know their epistemological status. We don't know if they are well-founded or not. But what is so interesting in starting with generally accepted opinions, I'm going to use the word custom. What is so useful about starting with customs is that it doesn't necessarily, that inquiry does not pit itself against them. It wants to sort out the final value of them. And some of them will be worthy of continuation. Some of them will be, superstitions or fabrications. But in treating them as generally accepted opinions, that may be authoritative, that may be accurate and contain truth. We open ourselves up to the possibility, again, that the opinions of the community are useful to us, and we don't initially start with the premise that we need somehow to tear them down. We begin the process of inquiry with a more positive relation to custom and to law and to tradition than if we begin with a skepticism. Does that help, Mariam?
Yes. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
That, I guess I see, and I really want to get some more feedback here. I see Descartes is beginning at a very different position, and most modern philosophy beginning at a very different position on that. And that's where al-Fārābī is more conducive to a more positive relation between science and community than what we have had for the last 350 or 400 years.
Okay.
That's why the classical Arabic tradition of al-Fārābī, Ibn Bajjah, Ibn Rushd, Ibn Timlus can be so powerfully important to us. It does not oppose itself so directly to the common community and tries to place science as something in a superior position.
Let me ask you, it's a provocative question, but just to, to get some additional, answers. How can we convince or succeed to convince a mathematician that rhetoric or poetry or poetics are useful to his field, to his scientific field? Do you have any example? Do you have an example of a scientist from nowadays? That's it. It's easy.
So I think that the most obvious way to proceed is simply that in any class that is teaching science, there are premises that are written in natural language that are used within the discipline.
But excuse me, but this is teaching, not research. It's usual that it's okay. Many historians and philosophers of sciences, say that analogy, metaphors are, useful in some scientific discoveries. But how can we say that or convince them that al-Fārābī is still useful? That's what I'm trying to.
When you get premises that are in natural languages that are being used in the science, whether it's in teaching or in research, and they are expressed in a natural language, those premises, there are elements of Euclid that are still used, not all of them, but some of the principles of Euclidean geometry are still used, and they're stated in sentences, they're stated in judgments. So it's unavoidable that natural language, natural language still has to be used.
Yes.
Even if it's seen as a launching pad to the study of number. The definition that I gave you of a triangle is the definition that was that is in a natural language.
Okay. Yes, please, Miriam. I mean, go ahead, but
Maria.
you need to put on your microphone.
Yes.
Yes,
Thank
please.
you very much. Thank you very much, Terry, for this interesting talk. I have a question related to the demonstrative arguments and the dialectical arguments, actually. Because I remember, to my mind, that it is the mutakallimun, Muslim theologians, that are usually considered to use dialectical arguments or al-adilla al-jadaliyya. And philosophy, to my mind, is more about demonstrative arguments. And I guess maybe you would agree with that, Terry, since you are saying that al-Fārābī, like Aristotle and those Arab philosophers, they were unlike what you said about modernism and French or German philosophy, that they were looking, that they believed that they can know the essences of things. And definitely that would not be based on widely held beliefs, since dialectical arguments are based on premises that are widely held beliefs, while demonstrative arguments are based on true premises. But now the thing is, is there an idea, would Fārābī help us in, or does he have a certain criteria for the truth, epistemological maybe theory that allows us to say whether certain premises are related to dialectical argument or widely held beliefs, or whether they can be used in demonstrative arguments, which is basically that leads us to the truth, to knowing the nature or the essence of things. So simply how would he distinguish between those premises that are widely held beliefs and those premises that lead to certainty, that are demonstrative? Since you said that the four arts, actually the end or the ideal end for the four arts is to reach the demonstrative art, or that is the goal, or that is the end, that is the criteria. The demonstrative art is the goal and the criteria of the four other arts. I don't know if I was clear in explaining what.
Okay, thanks very much. You've opened up several very important aspects of the question, and I'll try to deal with them each in turn. Fārābī is reorganizing the order and understanding of Aristotle's organon as he inherits it. I'm going to leave open the question of what the original order that Aristotle intended for the organon. But definitely al-Fārābī is inheriting an organon, an arrangement, understanding of the organon, through some of the Neoplatonic writers that he's aware of. And I think he's disagreeing with it. And he's disagreeing with it to the extent that they are moving too quickly to assume that demonstration is the highest and the only art worth pursuing, or they may not even call it an art anymore. And he is reworking the organon, first of all, to make it into a study of the arts. And those arts are five. the five that I've listed here. And I think that is very deliberate on his part. I think that the tradition, I think Avicenna goes back to that Neoplatonic ordering of the organon. And I think the Latins, Aquinas, and so on, go back to the understanding that the posterior analytics is the pinnacle and everything leads up and away from that. And I think in al-Fārābī, you don't get that sense to anywhere in any way in the same degree. Because he rearranges the five arts, he says they are all necessary, and he articulates them that way, and he places dialectic at such an important place in the whole procedure. Now, of course, the Mutakalamun we usually associate with the ones for the dialecticians. I think that's part of al-Fārābī's challenge, because Maimonides, for example, says that the arguments of the Mutakalamun were inherited from earlier Christian traditions, and he may well be right in that, and I think al-Fārābī would agree with him. So the association of dialectic with the Mutakalamun is deep, but al-Fārābī knows that Aristotle's account of dialectic, or Plato and Aristotle's account of dialectic, is not what is being practiced by the Mutakalamun. It is a different definition, a different account of the art, and he has to make that distinction, and I think he does. Okay, so that's one aspect of the question. Al-Fārābī does some very interesting things with the organon. For example, he takes material from the topics and he places it ahead of his commentary on the posterior analytics. And why is he doing that? Well, one of the reasons, I think, is that when you finish the common rules of argumentation, and those are found in the categories de interpretatione and in the prior analytics, those are the common rules of argumentation that are true in all of the logical arts. The next question you have to ask is, okay, we can make sentences, we can make judgments, we can think about how the categories fit into those judgments. We can think about the relation of one sentence or one judgment to another one, and we make syllogisms and so on. The key question that follows from that is, where do we get our premises? Because the certainty of analytics is important, but it depends upon an answer to the already established question of where do we get the premises to start our syllogisms. And al-Fārābī is very aware of that crucial problem. And it is one of the main reasons, I think, that he says the topics, some of the material from the topics, more rightly belongs prior to the posterior analytics, the supposed treatise which is so important to demonstration. Some of the material of what he's going to call dialectics, the art of dialectic, belongs prior to the study of the posterior analytics. And in the other versions of the organon, there is they move over too quickly. They pass over too quickly where we get the premises to put in the syllogisms to make arguments. The most crucial question is, it is not addressed very directly. And al-Fārābī sees that problem, and he rearranges part of the organon in order to do that. I think it would be a better way of thinking about these 5 arts as they're 5 pieces of pie, and they're all 5 different ways of getting to the center of the pie. I think it would be. I can't give you anything off the top of my head, but at a certain point, a scientist, in order to make a demonstration, to explain what is going on in the science principle or law, is going to use poetic language. It is going to use a metaphor. Is going to use something which we would think is sort of radically unscientific. But that is how important all of the arts are to demonstration. And you can't get to this ideal of demonstration without already being a master of poetry and being a master of rhetoric and being a master of dialectic. Now notice in doing that how he is not treating demonstration as sort of the golden jewel and everything else can be ignored in the process. No, every one of the other arts needs to be learned at the same time. It's as important as you think about demonstration to be thinking about rhetoric. It is as important to understand the art of poetry and music as it is to understand the art of demonstration. I mean, here is this very learned medieval philosopher. He spends a huge amount of time writing a book on music. Why? It's because it matters as much for argumentation in language and in politics and in religion and in science as any of the other arts. So that's part of your answer, Mariam. What was the last part of your question? Anyway, think of
I can see, like, I feel that maybe al-Fārābī, when he's emphasizing like the art of poetry, let's say, as one of the arts, and we want to know the essence, the nature of things. Maybe the art of poetry, the metaphors, the musics help humans to reach a certain state of tasdeeq or consent, which you say, that maybe the philosophy or jadal are able to achieve. So, for example, like believing in God, like maybe this is something as if he's saying is maybe we cannot use philosophy or the art of demonstration in achieving that, but maybe through the use of rhetoric and poetry, we can reach certain type of knowledge that maybe science cannot achieve.
So I just want to stress that al-Fārābī is always going to call rhetoric and poetry and dialectic and sophistry, he's going to call them rational arts. They are not the irrational things that exist before or after true philosophy. They are what needs to be learned as much as any other part and are important to the goal or task of knowledge, of obtaining knowledge. That's the difference. That's the reason some of these rearrangements, some of these other versions of the organon are so difficult because, well, for example, in the Latin tradition, poetry and rhetoric get excluded as not being even part of philosophy. So that there are only 5 books that are important to the organon, and poetry and rhetoric and also the topics are kind of afterthoughts. That is not al-Fārābī at all. That is not where he's going with any of that. But it became the dominant tradition that Bacon and Descartes and a number of them are disagreed with in the early Enlightenment. In other words, they have a misrepresentation, at very least, of this Arabic tradition, beginning with al-Fārābī. And if al-Fārābī is accurate, I think he would say they have fundamentally misunderstood Plato and Aristotle, and the criticisms that they're making of Plato and Aristotle are inaccurate. They were criticizing a certain Platonic account of the organon that was inherited, maybe through Avicenna, but certainly through the Latins, which tended to place poetry and rhetoric as afterthoughts to when all the important work is done. And that is not al-Fārābī.
Okay. Do you have something to say, Charles? Thank you, Miriam. You have something to add, Charles?
I do, but maybe the 2 Mariams have something else to say?
Okay. Joseph?
Okay.
Okay.
No, I would like to say something otherwise.
Okay, go ahead.
Let me suggest the following. I would like to suggest that there is no such thing as a burhan ilmi, that the only thing that we should understand when we say burhan is hujjah. A burhan is a proof, nothing more. And I think that the tradition has tried to make more of it. That's just an opening point. And here's what I would put down as reasons for saying that. One very important part of al-Jaddal for al-Fārābī is tashkīk, fomenting or occasioning doubt. It's the fomenting, the occasioning doubt that helps us see what's wrong with the position that somebody is putting forth, usually an adversary is putting forth. And then I would just say, do we have any instance of ilm yaqeen, or is it not more accurate to say that what we have is al-i'tiqād al-yaqeen? Okay, we don't have certain knowledge, we have certain belief, and we don't have demonstration in the sense of something that is how do we put it, apodiactic.
Yes.
That somehow is beyond question, that all the demonstration, really, the burhan, all it is a proof or even an argument. I just wonder, what you would make about those kinds of I would call them distillations of al-Fārābī, but one might also call them assertions.
Well, I think I agree with everything you said. I mean, his concern is that we go for the jewel too quickly, and we think we have a possession of what what those demonstrations are, and they're actually much more limited. And we may be able to talk about demonstration more easily in regard to number, but not with the whole of nature. And so there needs to be, I mean, science, to be good science, cannot overstep its bounds. It has to know what it can be confident in, and it has to know when to say there are things that it does not know. And the temptation will be to simplify the great issues, to simplify science, and to think, I have it all figured out. And of course, it makes science dogmatic.
Okay.
It doesn't make it an important tool, an important way of doing inquiry. It means that we think we have the jewel of the crown, and we have it relatively easily. And I think al-Fārābī is going to throw some stumbling blocks in our way, if that's what we think. And I think he would say the same, with politics or religion. We think we have a final metaphysical account of the whole of being, and therefore we know how to revolutionize politics. We know how to propagate a certain religious opinion because we're right about it. And I think he's again going to caution us that we're in not a world that is full of skepticism, but a world that needs to be able to make genuine inquiries and to know when it can be certain, and to know that it needs to not press the point.
Okay.
And if you have a premature science, I think it tends to encourage a premature dogmatism in politics and a premature dogmatism in religion. And so you continue to create problems and clashes of opinions that are unnecessary.
Okay, I have questions for you, Terry. Do you have some time?
Me?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
It's only 1 o'clock where I am.
Yeah. But we have only, we'll have 8 to 10 minutes, not more.
I had a cup of coffee an hour ago, so I'm good to go.
Yes. Okay, let me be short. From the point of view of al-Fārābī, where we can put two kinds of discourse: Quranic discourse, first. Second, theological discourse. I mean, the discourse used by the mutakallimin. And this, my question joined, the question by Miriam, put right now. So my question is really, really clear. The other one is, if you defend the demonstrative or the demonstrative argument, do you have an example where al-Fārābī used really this demonstration? Do you have an example of that? In other words, can we be demonstrative when talking metaphysics? You know about the harsh criticism by al-Ghazali. Philosophers mainly Aristotle, Plato, al-Fārābī, and Avicenna failed to be demonstrative when talking metaphysics. So now we are in front of, a suggestion that the 5 arts can cover human knowledge. So how can we, answer or to reply to or respond to Al-Ghazali? So go ahead, please.
Oh, okay. Well, let me start with the question of Quranic study. I think it should be studied. I think the rhetoric of the Quran must be studied in careful detail.
Yeah.
And there may be other arts that may be involved, dialectic can be involved, and so on. The Quran is speaking to different people at the same time according to their ability to know, and according to the kinds of arguments they understand. And that's its beauty. That is not a weakness. It is part of its strength in that it is drawing together people of different kinds of persuasion and different roles, and is drawing them together to make community. You notice several times in my presentation when I talked about religion, I almost immediately talked about community. I mean, surely after a month of Ramadan, we're all reminded of the importance of community in religion. And al-Fārābī puts his finger on that. All right, let me talk about
the epistemological side. Some people or some believers, at least, or they may say that, no, we are in front of certainty or certain knowledge. This is divine knowledge. And you are talking about, a rhetorical or poetical or even dialectical side of the Quranic discourse. Sorry to be so provocative about this, but I agree with you from a point of view like of Averroes, of Ibn Rushd. So Ibn Rushd, focused more on this side, the side which moves, the souls of people to be virtuous. But what about the epistemological, content?
So there are verses in the Quran which speak very clearly about the oneness and the unity of God. And verses like that are important for the philosopher, the theologian, and the layperson. They cut across the epistemological differences, if you will, that people have as they approach many topics. Miriam, today we talked in class about the throne verse. The throne verse can be understood differently by different people. Some people might understand it as a way of saying that God is corporeal. Others would say that it is metaphoric. They're both learning something of the nature of God's governance and sovereignty, even if understood in different ways. There are verses that have equivocal meanings, have more than one meaning. There are verses that have univocal meanings, only one meaning, and they're important for everybody. Now, let me switch to al-Ghazali, and I'm going to make a few critical comments about al-Ghazali. In his Munkid min al-Dalal, he gives an autobiographical account of the decisions he makes as a lawyer in Baghdad to leave and become a Sufi. And the reason he gives is that he does not think legal argumentation is sufficient, and that he has been plagued with doubt, that his questions that emerge from the study of philosophy, I don't know, he doesn't say this exact kind of language, but he has angst, or he's troubled because he cannot get certainty. Here you have a person who was raised with a very high expectation of how certain we can be about the most important things. And when he has that question, it crushes him to the point where he gives up his legal tradition and jurisprudence and says, notice what he's doing. He's moving from a discipline which is deeply rooted in the community, that is law, and he moves to become a solitary Sufi mystic. His perception of the highest ideal in religion is not a political one. I wish we knew a little bit more about how his family thought about this decision, because it is a turning away from the political in the name of some kind of expectation of certainty, which came about because he was crushed by the fact that he couldn't get all these quick answers, and that his dogmatism was in a frail situation. So he spends a great deal of time being a solitary mystic devotee. When he comes back, he says, what you should study is logic and mathematics. If you're a religious believer, what you're studying is logic and mathematics. But you do not need to be studying physics or astronomy or a lot of natural science, because it will erode your faith. And Sufism became an answer to that question that he didn't have a good way of addressing exactly these questions of skepticism that came up in the natural sciences. I don't think long term that is a recipe that Islam or Christianity should be following to understand what is going on in those respective religious traditions. I think Ibn Rushd needs to be taken very seriously when he says Al-Ghazali may have meant well, but he led people to unbelief.
Still, this is, sorry to say this, but this is just ad hominem argumentum. It's, you just attacked Al-Ghazali, but still his criticism was powerful. I mean, and that was my question about his criticism, not his, human condition. What about his criticism? But why I say this? Because even Ibn Rushd, even Averroes, recognized that the previous philosophers failed in their, when talking about metaphysics. That's the idea. I'm not defending Al-Ghazali.
What is ad hominem?
Sorry,
Well, I don't see the ad hominem. I see the personal attack there.
I understood the response by Turi. He attacked the life of Al-Ghazali to say that he wasn't stable in his mind, and his recipe is not wasn't, I mean, useful to follow it. I mean, he was not so, I mean, coherent in his thought. But my question was about his criticism, not his
just let me be very clear on the argument I was making.
Yes.
This is exactly what he says of his own experience in Munkid min al-Dalal.
I agree with you based on al-Munkid.
And he says he was seeking certainty that
Yes.
he could not get. I would ask the question, where did you get your notion of certainty? Why did you think certainty was so simple? Why did you think that somehow, fairly easily, you can come up with answers as to questions about, I don't know, the eternity of the world? Who is creating in your mind that sense of certainty?
It was
And if you don't get it, it radically changes everything you think about in regard to community and family and religion and so on. Al-Fārābī is very serious that metaphysics matters.
Yes, I agree.
What he says is that we do not possess it. It doesn't mean he says it doesn't matter. He just says we don't have it in our pocket. I'm sorry. And if you don't know that, you're going to do some fairly destructive thing. You do some mischief to yourself and to everyone around you. And I think he's very serious about that, because there's a tendency, unfortunately, in our political and religious communities to think we have it all sewn up. And we can very easily answer and deal with the great questions. Why can't we think that they're more a matter of inquiry? Aren't there amazing things to discover about the nature of reality that are a little different than we expected, and maybe more amazing than we expected? Miriam and I talked for a while today after class about, what's the most important attribute of God? Is it God's power? Or is it God's wisdom?
According to the Airways, is wisdom, yes.
I deal with a lot of Calvinists, and I'll tell you what they think. They think they're always talking about God's sovereignty as being power.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to think, well, I don't know. Maybe there's another attribute that's even more important than that. And it has to do with wonder, or it has to do with wisdom. And maybe that's what's manifest in nature, and not simply God has a strong arm. As a parent, what do my kids want to see in me? That I can bully them around? Or do they want to see that I give them lots of freedom to make their own decisions? Maybe I'll try to guide them a little here and there. Maybe I wish they would come to me more often and ask for my advice. But no, a sovereign reigns by way of wisdom and wonder and majesty, and not by way of bullying. And if we think that what matters in theology is God's ability to push us around, we're apt to think that what matters in politics is the same. And we're apt to think that in family relations, that my job is to tell everybody what to do. Where do we get all that from? Why does life have to be lived like that?
Thank you. Thank you so much. I always enjoy your lectures and your responses. So do you have any additional comments or question quickly, please? Miriam. She is not tired, huh?
I think she's a nighthawk. That's what I've discovered. She stays up watching.
Maybe it follows up on the question that Fouad asked. Like, I'm going back to that Ibn Rushd distinction between rhetorical and demonstrative burhan wal-khitaba, and just want to make sure. Like, does Farabi have the same position like Ibn Rushd? Like when he said, I think in فصل المقال ما بين الشريعة والحكمة من اتصال. Ibn Rushd, he said that Sharia, like, which is, I assume, like knowledge that we get from the Holy Quran or from Scripture, is does not contradict with knowledge that we can achieve with in philosophy. So, but the thing is that common people can the rhetorical arguments that the language of the Quran suits the common people and make them believe, but the philosophers are more convinced by the use of hujjah. He actually says al-burhan. That takes me back to that question. Like when I teach Fasl al-Maqal, or when I used to teach that in my classes, always the questions come, and I can never. I'm not able to answer it, although I wish. Like, what are the hujjah al-falsafiyya that, for example, that Ibn Rushd considers to be like so much hujjah that the philosophers are convinced with, like the hujjah that the philosopher use, or burhan al-aqli. What is burhan al-aqli? When we apply it to metaphysics, like I know that burhan al-aqli is mainly for mathematics, but it seems that Ibn Rushd and other philosophers, when they talked about burhan, they wanted to apply it even to metaphysical knowledge. So again, back to Fouad's question, I would really love to understand, like, how will burhan, and I think Farabi thinks the same, how will burhan, according to them, can reach a certain knowledge that is kind of more sure than any other kind of knowledge?
Well, I agreed with Charles's earlier comments about
not burhan.
I'm getting some feedback here about there aren't as many demonstrations in these writers as we think. So I am a little surprised when I hear someone talking about, oh, maybe Ibn Rushd's commentaries on the soul. And they're talking about all the demonstrations that are found therein. And sure enough, when you start to read the middle commentary, he starts talking about opinions. And Ibn Rushd is dealing with the opinions we have about the nature of the soul. And again, I think Charles' question is well put. And every once in a while, we just need to stop and say, well, if we think there are all these demonstrations in these treatises, let's look at one of them. Right? Where is the demonstration exactly? And that's where the rhetorical style needs to be understood pretty carefully in Ibn Rushd treatises, and the same with al-Fārābī, because they're more reserved about the possibility that there are easy demonstrations for these things. I mean, Ibn Rushd says that demonstrations will not be written in books. So we read these books as if they're full of demonstrations. He even tells us they're not going to be in the books. Right? He even said that. So why do we assume that the middle commentary on the De Anima is full of demonstrations when demonstrations are not going to be written in books? Mariam, today I think I mentioned this in class. I said, for al-Fārābī, philosophy is faculty. It is not even a book. that might cause us to gasp, right? It is not even a book. He's straight out of the Phaedrus on that. The Phaedrus makes this argument. When you put things in books, you freeze them, you make them available to people who may misuse them, and so on. Philosophy is a faculty. Maybe you need the books to get you going on it. But it is a mind. It is a quality of knowing. And it's not confined to the bellies of books. And I think that amazing little piece of al-Fārābī, the emergence of philosophy, I think hints at that throughout. It's a very important piece of writing of al-Fārābī, and I wish we knew more about it. I think al-Fārābī is saying that there was a tradition of philosophy from Aristotle and Theophrastus right through to his own day. And yes, they had books, and the books mattered, but philosophy finally was a faculty that was passed on and imitated from one generation to the next with a very small number of people.
Okay.
Just small comment. Excuse me.
Please, Karim, please.
There is a statement by Averroes in his rhetoric says that demonstrative is to be used with someone with himself.
Yeah.
Unlike dialectic and the rhetoric that is to be used with others.
Yeah.
So is this can be the reason why there is no so much demonstrative argument in the books?
So the problem is that books cannot defend themselves. You write something in a book, and 5 years from now, somebody misrepresents it and says, you said this. And that may not have been what you said at all. And it may not have been what you intended. Philosophy in the end is done by a small group of people orally. It's something done amongst friends. But it matters. And it will be salutary for a larger community than that group of friends. It will be good for the whole nation that some people sit together and converse about the most important things.
Yes.
And even if it's the scholar with himself or herself, it still can be something beneficial to the larger community because it will change that individual's response to the community and the action. But yes, absolutely. These are such important themes in this classical tradition. They were not understood, as far as I can tell, by the Latin tradition. They were not understood by the critiques of Plato and Aristotle in the early Enlightenment. And of course, the Enlightenment, even by characterizing itself as the Enlightenment, was saying everybody, truth can be made known to everybody very easily. And surely that's one of the snags that we are still dealing with, because it is just not true.
I received a quick question, please, in 2 minutes. I mean, we have no additional time. We have to stop, I mean, in 3 or 5 minutes. The question says, are those 5 rational arts contradict each other, or they have the same goal or the same end? So what do you think about this?
No, I don't think they contradict.
They serve each other?
Yeah. So let's take rhetoric, for example. I continuously call rhetoric a rationalizing art. Rhetoric deals with enthymemes. It deals with premises that are not absolutely secure and certain. But it makes the best it can out of those arguments. It rationalizes the argument as best it can. Maroon Awad has a nice little essay on this, which I think he's right about.
Terry, I'm not sure that I can agree with you on this based on al-Fārābī himself. Somewhere in his Poetics, he says that, why some poetical discourse succeeds? Because, I mean, mind hasn't enough time to be rational. So when reason is absent, so poetical discourse can succeed. I mean, he says this in his two treatises on poetry. On the other side, I agree with you. Averroes, Ibn Rushd says it clearly that even the man of demonstration needs examples and metaphors. They are helpful, I mean, in his work. But you know, I am so careful about this mainly al-Fārābī is not so clear that the five arts, I mean, do not contradict each other.
So one of the difficulties we have in studying this classical Arabic philosophic tradition is that we think things either have to be either or. So rhetoric can rationalize the community without making it completely rational. I mean, I don't think he thinks that's possible. But it can be beneficial, it can be salutary. Al-Fārābī and Ibn Rushd cannot be understood unless we realize that they rank everything.
Yes.
They put everything in a gradation. There are degrees of rationality.
Yeah, I agree.
There are degrees of certainty. And if we have to slot them into either or, we're not going to get very far in understanding them. That's one of the difficulties we have with this tradition, I think. Al-Fārābī looks like he calmly writes over the whole history of philosophy and never disagrees with anyone very much. He is constantly ranking and evaluating and giving us hints about how we understand the tradition as it has come to us. But he's not going to be easy on us because we need to do our homework. And he's not always going to be telling us when he disagrees or agrees with somebody, but he is ranking them and he is giving them a gradation in the degree of rationality you can find in that kind of argument.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this. And I mean, I'm really grateful to all of you. I mean, to remain with us till this time. Thank you, the two Miriams. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Joseph. And I mean, I will see you next time. There are many lectures, I mean, on the list, and I am sure that we will enjoy talking to each other and listen to each other. Thank you, Terry, again. Sorry?
Could you share with us?
From Ahmad, Jordan. Have I met you before?
Sorry?
Can you repeat?
Could you share
Mariam,
passage?
There is some echoes in your...
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
And I'll catch up to you again. But I'm pleased to meet you, Mariam.
It's my pleasure.
And I'll see you back in Jordan.
I'm looking to see you in Amman, inshallah, soon, very soon, inshallah.
Inshallah. Shukran.
Are you in Amman now?
I'm in Sharjah, in the Emirates.
Looking to see you in
Only
Amman.
for one more day.
Charles.
Mariam
Charles,
has been a very good host. The other Mariam has been a very good host. And so we've had lots of good conversations together.
It's my great pleasure meeting you, all of you. Thank you.
Charles, do you have something to say, Charles?
Yes, I wanted you to share with us those two passages from the Poetics by al-Fārābī that you mentioned. That
Yeah,
the
thank you.
controversial path.
Yeah.
Could you please online, on an email? Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Having a nice
Thank you
time. Having
very
a nice evening. See you
Thank you,
soon.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Fouad. Thank
My
you, Ken.
pleasure. It's
Everyone.
always my pleasure. It's always my pleasure. Thank
Mariam,
you.
nice to meet you.
Thank you,
too.
Joseph. Have a nice time.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
See you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you,
Bye-bye.
Dr. Charles and Joseph, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.